Listen closely, because there is a moment in every person's life when the mind stops drifting and suddenly becomes sharp, steady, unshakable. That moment is not given by luck, nor by motivation, nor by comfort. It arrives when you force yourself to focus, when you take back control of the thoughts that pull you in every direction. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and this is the hour where you choose the color of your life, not by wishing, but by directing your attention with intention. Epictetus taught that no person is free unless they master their mind, and mastering the mind begins the second you stop chasing distractions and begin shaping your inner world. Seneca said that life is long if you know how to use it, and the first act of truly using it is choosing where your mind will rest. So as you sit here, breathe slowly and steady yourself, because the power you keep searching for does not appear in noise, it appears in quiet focus. It rises when you decide firmly and without hesitation that your attention belongs to you, not to the world, not to impulses, not to chaos. This is the doorway to your strength. Step through it, and everything begins to change. There is a quiet truth hidden beneath all the noise of daily life. Your mind becomes whatever you consistently allow it to become. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning that the world would test him, distract him, and try to pull him away from his purpose. Yet he wrote that the only thing truly in his control was the state of his own mind. When you begin to direct your focus instead of letting your thoughts wander, you take the first step toward that. Same inner command. Epictetus believed that every person carries two battles, the external world and the internal struggle, and the internal one is always the greater fight. The moment you decide to anchor your attention is the moment you stop losing that battle, because when your mind is scattered, the world pushes you easily, but when your mind is gathered, nothing moves you unless you choose to move. Seneca explained that greatness is not created through grand gestures, but through small, consistent moments where a person chooses discipline over ease. This is one of those moments. By drawing your thoughts back into one clear point, by refusing the temptation to scatter your energy, you begin to shape yourself into someone steady, deliberate, and capable of enduring anything. This is how strength is built in silence, and this is how your life begins to rise from the inside outward, quietly, patiently, powerfully. Strength grows in the spaces where most people refuse to look, the slow, quiet grind of returning your attention to what actually matters. Marcus Aurelius often wrote to himself as if steadying a wandering child, reminding his mind to come back, to stay present, to focus on the task in front of him. He understood that the mind naturally reaches outward, chasing noise, craving escape, drifting toward anything except the work that shapes the soul. But he also understood that every time you guide your attention back, you reclaim a little more of your life. Epictetus taught that we suffer not from events, but from the stories we let our minds spin around them. And when you focus deeply, those stories lose their grip. The noise stops feeling powerful. The chaos outside stops dictating the pace of your inner world. Only clarity remains. Seneca believed that a calm mind is not born from a calm life. It is born from a disciplined inner stance, sharpened every time a person chooses intention over impulse. This is the foundation of true power, the ability to sit with what is difficult, to keep your attention steady when everything around you pulls at it, to resist the pressure of distractions with a quiet strength that grows each time you return your mind to the present. Power is not loud, it is not dramatic. It emerges through the long practice of gathering your thoughts, holding them, and letting them form the person you are becoming. This is the work that transforms you in ways others cannot see, until one day they look at you and realize they are standing in front of someone who has mastered themselves. Power begins to reveal itself when you finally understand that your attention is the most valuable thing you possess. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the quality of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts, and you cannot shape your thoughts if your focus is scattered across every small disturbance that crosses your path. When your mind is divided, everything feels heavier, challenges seem unbeatable, goals feel distant, emotions pull you into directions you did not choose. But the moment you gather your awareness and guide it toward one steady point, everything shifts. Epictetus taught that nothing outside of you has the authority to disturb your peace unless you hand it that authority. And every time you pull your focus back from distractions, you take that authority away from the world and return it to yourself. Seneca believed that the person who knows how to hold their mind still, even for a few moments, holds an advantage over those who let the wind of circumstances sweep them around. This discipline does not arrive suddenly. It is shaped through practice, through returning to your path again and again, through noticing when your thoughts drift and choosing not to judge yourself for it, but to guide them patiently back. Over time, this becomes a quiet armor, a strength that others cannot see but can absolutely feel. You carry yourself differently, not because life becomes easier, but because you stop letting life dictate your direction. Focus becomes your anchor, your weapon, your refuge. And each time you choose it, you take one more step toward the person you were meant to become. There comes a point where you begin to recognize that your mind has been negotiating with distractions for far too long. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that a person's worth is revealed by the things they choose to give their attention to. If the mind is constantly pulled by impulses, gossip, noise, and empty entertainment, then life starts to lose its shape. But when you reclaim your attention, when you decide where your thoughts will live, everything starts to form around a clearer center. Epictetus taught that every decision you make either strengthens or weakens your character. Each moment you choose focus, you reinforce the part of you that is disciplined, intentional, and capable of carrying heavy responsibilities without collapsing. Each moment you surrender to distraction, you quietly weaken the foundation you stand on. Seneca believed that the mind is like a lamp. If the flame is steady, the whole room becomes clear. If the flame flickers, shadows multiply and confusion grows. So your task, in this phase of your life, is to protect that flame, not by avoiding the world, but by managing your inner world with firm hands and a patient heart. As you deepen your focus, something subtle happens. The pressure you once felt from the outside begins to lose its force. The judgments of others fade. The noise of the world grows lighter. You start to move with a different kind of rhythm. Slower in your reactions, stronger in your decisions, calmer in your presence. This is the transformation the Stoics understood. When your attention is disciplined, your emotions follow, your actions sharpen, and your purpose becomes undeniable. Slowly you begin to realize that the power you were searching for was never in some distant future. It was always hidden inside the parts of you that refused to quit. And with each deliberate moment of focus, you uncover another piece of that power, shaping yourself into someone who does not need the world's permission to rise. There is a silent discipline that begins forming within you when you consistently return your attention to what matters. Marcus Aurelius understood that the mind can either be a fortress or a prison, depending on the direction you allow it to take. When your focus drifts, the mind becomes chaotic, scattered, restless. But the moment you gently guide it back, the moment you decide with firmness and clarity where your thoughts will settle, the fortress starts to strengthen. Epictetus taught that the first freedom any person must claim is the freedom of their own attention, because if you cannot direct your thoughts, the world will direct them for you, and the world is never gentle with a mind that cannot stand firm. Seneca believed that clarity comes to those who choose stillness over noise and dedication over ease. When you slow your thoughts, not by force but by intention, you begin to see your patterns more clearly. You recognize where you waste your energy, where you chase illusions, where you give away your peace for things that never deserved it. This awareness is the beginning of transformation, because once you see clearly, you cannot pretend you do not know. As you continue shaping this discipline, you start to not. Ice changes within yourself. Your reactions grow slower but wiser. Your emotions become deeper but steadier. Your decisions stop coming from panic and begin coming from presence. You no longer feel the need to rush, because you understand that power does not live in speed. It lives in consistency, in patience, in the ability to stay with one moment fully. And slowly, without announcing itself, real strength begins to form. Not the loud kind that tries to impress the world, but the quiet kind that allows you to hold your ground, even when everything around you is uncertain. This is the strength the Stoics valued, the strength born from disciplined focus, from the calm mind that refuses to be pulled apart by every passing impulse. This is the strength you are building right now, moment by moment, thought by thought. Progress becomes real. The moment you realize that focus is not simply about ignoring distractions, it is about choosing a direction for your life and refusing to abandon it. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that every action should serve a purpose aligned with virtue, not impulse. When you begin to practice this, even in the smallest ways, you feel something shift inside. The noise that once felt overwhelming begins to lose its power, and the path ahead becomes more defined. Epictetus taught that we should guard our attention with the same seriousness we guard our most precious possessions, because the mind shapes the destiny of every step we take. If your attention remains scattered, your life remains scattered. If your attention grows disciplined, your life grows disciplined. Seneca believed that a person grows stronger each time they choose intention over impulse, and with every return to focus, you train yourself to live more deliberately. You start noticing how often the world tries to pull you away through pressure, comparison, anxiety, and the constant temptation to escape into things that feel easy but leave you empty. But with steady practice, your inner stance begins to change. You stop reacting to everything. You stop rushing into every thought that appears. You stop letting the world dictate your rhythm. And something unexpected happens. You begin to connect with yourself at a deeper level. You feel the difference between the thoughts that drain you and the thoughts that build you. You sense the quiet strength growing every time. You choose presence over distraction. You recognize that your mind is no longer running away from challenges, but turning toward them with clarity and purpose. This is the moment when you truly begin to rise, because once you understand that your attention is the architect of your entire reality, you no longer give it away carelessly. You hold it with intention. You direct it with wisdom. And with each breath spent in focus, you shape yourself into someone your past self would admire, someone who stands firmly in who they are becoming, not who the world tries to make them be. True power is discovered not in action alone, but in the moments before action, in the quiet space where your mind decides its course. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul must be trained to endure distraction, temptation, and the constant pull of fleeting pleasures, for only a disciplined mind can shape a life of purpose. When you force yourself to focus, you are not merely completing tasks, you are shaping the very structure of your inner world. Epictetus taught that the mind is like a city. Strong walls and orderly streets protect it from chaos. But if the gates are left open, intruders flood in, disrupting every plan, every thought, every intention. Focus is the act of closing those gates with awareness, of patrolling your inner space so that nothing enters without your permission. Seneca reminded us that life is long enough for those who know how to use it, but wasted by those whose attention is scattered. Every moment spent drifting, without control, is a moment that could have been devoted to building your strength, your clarity, your purpose. Each time you anchor your mind, you reclaim a piece of time that would otherwise slip into regret. This process is slow, almost imperceptible at first, but it compounds. The small victories of focus, repeated day after day, begin to weave themselves into your character. You start to act differently without thinking about it. Your decisions become sharper, your emotions grow steadier, your presence becomes undeniable because it is rooted in intention rather than reaction. There is an elegance in this discipline, a quiet satisfaction in the knowledge that while the world may be loud, chaotic, and relentless, you have cultivated an inner realm that is yours alone. It does not demand recognition, nor applause, nor admiration. It simply exists as a stronghold of your own making. In that stronghold, you discover that the power you sought externally was always within, waiting for the day you chose to wield it by focusing your mind, cultivating your attention, and embracing the slow, patient work of mastery. This is the art of becoming powerful, to sit with your mind, to guide it with patience, and to watch quietly as the life you shape begins to reflect the discipline and clarity you have cultivated inside. There is a subtle transformation that begins when you commit to focus, one that few notice until it has already reshaped the very way you move through life. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that the mind must be trained to rise above the pull of trivialities, to hold itself steady even when the world pushes in every direction. When you force your attention to rest on what truly matters, you are doing more than concentrating on a task. You are sculpting the contours of your character. Epictetus taught that the mind is like a ship. Without a firm hand at the helm, it drifts endlessly, tossed by every wave and current. But when you seize control of your attention, you chart your own course, and the storms of life begin to have less sway over your journey. Seneca explained that few people realize how much of life slips away through scattered thought and wasted energy, yet every moment reclaimed through focus is a victory, small at first, almost imperceptible, but cumulatively powerful. As you anchor your mind, you start to see clearly what is important and what is not. The pressures that once felt insurmountable begin to appear manageable. Decisions that once paralyzed you now flow with greater clarity, not because the world has changed, but because your mind has learned to hold its center. You begin to understand that distraction is not merely a lapse of attention, it is a surrender of your own power, and the act of reclaiming it, of pulling your focus back from chaos into order, is the act of rising above circumstances, of becoming unshakable from the inside out. Slowly, patiently, deliberately, this practice strengthens the very essence of who you are, shaping a presence that is both calm and commanding, reflective and decisive. Each time you bring your attention back, you affirm to yourself that you are not a passenger in your life, but its pilot, and that, above all, is where true power begins to dwell, in the quiet, unwavering choice to direct your mind moment by moment toward what builds you instead of what diminishes you. Enduring strength is not born from comfort, nor from fleeting bursts of will, but from the repeated act of returning your mind to focus over and over, even when every impulse inside you whispers to turn away. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that the mind is the true citadel of power, and that without mastery over one's own thoughts, no external victory could ever matter. When you make the deliberate choice to force your attention onto what matters, you begin to rise above the influence of circumstance, the pull of noise, and the temptation to settle for ease. Epictetus taught that true freedom is found in the discipline of the mind, in the unwavering refusal to let events or other people dictate your inner state. Each moment spent reclaiming your focus is a quiet act of sovereignty, a statement that your life will not be ruled by distraction or chaos. Seneca observed that many squander their days chasing illusions, allowing their attention to drift to things that add nothing to the strength of their character. But when you direct your focus intentionally, you plant the seeds of resilience, clarity, and purpose. At first, this may feel tedious, even exhausting, because the mind is used to scattering itself across every impulse. Yet, as the practice deepens, the act of returning to focus becomes second nature. You begin to notice the subtle differences, the clarity of thought, the calmness of presence, the ability to endure difficulty without losing composure. The world may remain loud, uncertain, and unrelenting, but within you a quiet power takes root. Each disciplined moment compounds into something vast, something unmistakable, a mind that cannot be easily swayed, a person who stands firm not because the path is easy, but because they have learned to wield the greatest weapon of all, the strength of deliberate attention. And this, more than anything else, is what separates those who are shaped by life from those who shape it themselves. The mind is a garden, and focus is the cultivation that determines what grows within it. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that thoughts left unattended will sprout into habits, and habits unchecked become the very fabric of a person's life. When you deliberately choose to gather your attention, you are tending this inner garden with care, removing the weeds of distraction and planting the seeds of clarity, strength, and purpose. Epictetus taught that no external circumstance can disturb a person who has mastered their own mind, because mastery begins in the conscious choice to direct every thought intentionally. Every moment spent redirecting your mind away from fleeting impulses and toward what truly matters is a step toward sovereignty over yourself, a quiet act that no one else can observe but whose effects shape the entirety of your being. Seneca warned that people waste their lives in small, unnoticed ways, drifting through hours and days without anchoring themselves to what is meaningful. But as you build the discipline to focus, you begin to recognize the difference between that which nourishes your inner life and that which depletes it. Your awareness sharpens. The constant pull of external noise begins to fade, leaving a space of calm in which you can act deliberately and thoughtfully. The small victories of attention compound, and over time the person you become is no longer a reflection of circumstance or distraction, but of intentionality and purpose. You move differently through life, slower perhaps, but with greater power, steadier perhaps, but with far deeper presence. This is the transformation that comes from forcing yourself to focus, an unshakable mind, a deliberate character, and a life that grows not in haste or chaos, but in the patient, relentless pursuit of clarity and self-mastery. Real power is often hidden in the small, unnoticed acts of returning your mind to focus when it drifts. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that every distraction is a choice, and every choice shapes the soul. When you force your attention to remain steady, you begin to reclaim time and energy that the world would otherwise take without permission. Epictetus taught that people are not disturbed by events themselves, but by the judgments they make about them. And when you direct your focus intentionally, you begin to control these judgments before they control you. Every moment of sustained attention becomes an exercise in freedom, a quiet demonstration that you will not be swayed by impulse, by chaos, or by the trivial urgencies that constantly demand your mind. Seneca observed that the greatest tragedies are not sudden misfortunes, but lives squandered through distraction, through the endless scattering of thought across unimportant matters. The practice of focus begins in patience, in noticing when your mind drifts, acknowledging it without judgment, and gently but firmly guiding it back to the work that builds your character. With repetition, this practice becomes more than a habit. It becomes the foundation of your resilience, the framework for your clarity, and the source of a quiet power that others may not see but cannot help but feel. Life does not become easier, but you grow stronger. The storms around you do not cease, but you remain steadfast. Step by step, thought by thought, the deliberate choice to focus becomes a shield, a weapon, and a home, a space within which you are free to act, free to grow, and free to rise above the distractions and confusions that dominate the lives of so many. This is the beginning of mastery, and it starts with one unwavering decision: to claim your mind as your own. Strength begins quietly, in moments when you refuse to let the mind wander, aimlessly when you turn your attention inward and take command of your own thoughts. Marcus Aurelius often wrote to himself about the importance of guarding the mind against triviality, against the endless barrage of distractions that threaten to scatter our energy and dilute our purpose. He understood that real power is not granted by position, wealth, or applause, but emerges from the ability to stay present, to act intentionally, and to control the internal world even when the external one rages. Epictetus emphasized that freedom is the product of self-mastery. No circumstance can enslave you unless you allow it, and the first step in that mastery is the conscious act of directing your focus. Every time you pause to bring your thoughts back, to anchor your attention to what truly matters, you are reclaiming authority over yourself, building a foundation of calm strength that no outside force can shake. Seneca observed that life slips away not in great catastrophes, but in the quiet surrender to distraction, the habitual yielding to every passing whim and impulse. By contrast, when you choose focus, even in the smallest actions, you plant seeds that grow into resilience, clarity, and purposeful energy. The process is gradual, almost imperceptible at first, yet with each deliberate act of attention, you forge a mind that is steady, a character that is deliberate, and a presence that cannot be ignored. You begin to notice subtle shifts. Your thoughts are cleaner, your decisions sharper, your emotions calmer. The world may remain unpredictable, chaotic, and demanding, but within you a quiet fortress is forming. Here, power is not flashy, it does not announce itself. Instead, it manifests in patience, in discipline, and in the unwavering ability to hold your focus when everything else is trying to pull you away. This is the heart of Stoic strength, the power that grows in silence, and it begins the moment you decide, firmly and without hesitation, to direct your mind and refuse to surrender it to every passing distraction. Clarity emerges the instant you stop giving your mind away, the instant you choose to focus on what truly builds your life instead of scattering your energy on trivialities. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the quality of life depends on the quality of thought, and without deliberate attention, no action can ever produce lasting meaning. The distractions of the world are endless: noise, opinions, trivial tasks, fleeting emotions, all vying for the same precious resource, your attention. Epictetus taught that it is not events that disturb us, but the way we allow our minds to be carried by them. Each moment you deliberately redirect your focus is an act of freedom, a reclaiming of power that the world constantly seeks to pull away. In that steady return to purpose, you begin to construct an inner citadel that cannot be breached by chaos, confusion, or fleeting pleasures. Seneca observed that most lives are dissipated in small, unnoticed ways, in the scattering of thought, the indulgence of impulses, the surrender to distraction. And yet the person who holds their mind steady gains mastery over more than they often realize. When you focus, you are not only performing an act of attention, you are shaping the very architecture of your character, constructing patience, resilience, and deliberate presence, moment by moment. You begin to perceive a profound change within yourself. Choices that once felt heavy now become clearer, reactions that once felt impulsive now slow with purpose, and the pull of external chaos loses its hold over your inner state. The transformation is gradual but unmistakable. Quietly, persistently, power begins to inhabit you, not as something visible or loud, but as a steady, unshakable presence, the hallmark of a mind that has learned to govern itself, a person who rises from within rather than being pushed by the currents of life. And this is the essence of true Stoic mastery, the recognition that every moment spent directing your attention is a moment spent shaping the person you are meant to become. The path to true strength begins with the quiet decision to reclaim your attention from the countless forces that seek to scatter it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the mind is a sacred space, and if left unchecked, it will be pulled in every direction by trivialities, fears, and desires that hold no real value. To focus deliberately is not merely to complete tasks, but to assert control over your inner world, to take the first step toward mastering yourself, regardless of how chaotic the outside world may be. Epictetus taught that no one can harm or control you without your consent, and the first consent you must withhold is the surrender of your own attention. Every time your mind drifts and you bring it back, you are silently but profoundly strengthening your autonomy, your clarity, and your resilience. Seneca observed that the most significant losses in life are not those imposed by others, but those that occur when we allow our minds to be wasted on distraction, indecision, and trivial concerns. By cultivating focus, you begin to reclaim these losses moment by moment. You notice subtle shifts in your being, your thoughts grow cleaner, your actions more deliberate, your emotions steadier, and your presence more commanding, not because you have changed the world around you, but because you have changed the world within you. Each act of returning your attention is a silent victory, an accumulation of power that builds steadily, invisibly, until one day you realize that you have become someone unshakable, someone capable of enduring difficulty with calm and clarity, someone whose mind is a fortress and whose will cannot be easily bent. This is the essence of the Stoic path. Power does not come from circumstance, wealth, or recognition. It comes from the disciplined, patient, and deliberate mastery of your own mind, forged quietly in the long practice of focused attention. There is a quiet power in choosing to stay present, when everything inside and outside you screams for attention elsewhere. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the mind must be disciplined like a garden. Left untended, weeds of distraction overtake the soil, but with careful attention, the fruits of purpose and clarity grow. Epictetus taught that it is not external events that disturb us, but the judgments we place upon them, and focus is the tool that allows you to govern those judgments before they govern you. Seneca observed that many lives slip away unnoticed, not because of tragedy, but because attention was surrendered, day by day, to trivialities and fleeting desires. Each time you consciously return your mind to what matters, you reclaim a part of your life that would otherwise be lost. This act of focus, repeated over and over, is where your inner strength begins to crystallize. It is not flashy or loud. It does not announce itself to the world. Yet it buoys. LDS, a foundation that cannot be shaken, a calm and deliberate presence that moves through challenges with quiet authority. Slowly, patience becomes your ally, clarity becomes your habit, and power takes root in the soil of intention rather than reaction. The world may pull at you with chaos, noise, and distraction, but within, a steadfast mind is forming, one that is unyielding, deliberate, and capable of enduring anything without losing composure. This is the essence of the Stoic path. True mastery arises not from circumstance, but from the consistent, patient cultivation of attention, the deliberate shaping of thought, and the unwavering choice to remain present when it matters most. True mastery begins the moment you stop letting your mind drift at the whim of every passing thought, emotion, or external disturbance. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the mind, if left uncontrolled, becomes a chaos that mirrors the world's disorder, but when guided deliberately, it becomes a force capable of shaping a life of virtue and purpose. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by events themselves, but by the judgments we make about them, and that the first act of freedom is to direct those judgments consciously, with clarity and intention. Seneca observed that most people allow the hours of their lives to be quietly stolen by distraction, indulgence, and fleeting pleasures, failing to recognize the subtle loss of their own power. Yet each time you draw your attention back to what matters, each time you resist the temptation to scatter your mind, you reclaim not only a moment but a part of your life, a fragment of strength that compounds into unshakable inner authority. This discipline, repeated over countless hours, begins to transform the way you experience the world. Challenges no longer overwhelm you because you have trained yourself to meet them with deliberate thought rather than reaction. Decisions grow clearer, intentions sharper, and your presence steadier, not because circumstances have changed, but because the inner fortress of your mind has been strengthened. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a new power takes shape, a quiet, enduring force that does not demand attention, yet cannot be ignored. This is the essence of Stoic strength, the patient, deliberate cultivation of focus, the unwavering commitment to return to what matters again and again, and the recognition that the only true mastery lies in the governance of one's own mind. In this way, you rise, not through chance or circumstance, but through the persistent, deliberate exercise of attention, shaping yourself into someone capable of enduring, achieving, and becoming all that you are meant to be. Enduring focus is not born in a single decision, nor in moments of fleeting willpower, but in the relentless return of the mind to what is meaningful, even when the world clamors for attention elsewhere. Marcus Aurelius often wrote to himself about the importance of controlling the mind, understanding that the quality of life depends not on external events, but on the deliberate governance of thought. When you force yourself to remain present, when you gather your scattered attention and anchor it to what truly matters, you begin to construct an inner strength that is quiet yet unyielding. Epictetus taught that freedom arises not from circumstance, but from mastery over the mind, a mastery that begins the moment you refuse to surrender your attention to distraction or impulse. Each time you bring your awareness back, each time you choose to remain steadfast rather than drift, you fortify the foundation of your character, building patience, clarity, and resilience that no outside force can dismantle. Seneca reminded us that life is not measured merely by the passage of days, but by the deliberate use of our moments, the careful cultivation of thought, and the steady shaping of our inner world. Distraction is a subtle thief, quietly consuming hours and energy, leaving the mind weakened, fragmented, and restless. By contrast, the act of focus is a reclamation, a silent but profound assertion of sovereignty over yourself. As this practice deepens, you notice the transformation. Your thoughts gain precision, your emotions calm, your presence becomes steady, and your decisions carry a weight and deliberateness that was absent before. The world may remain noisy, chaotic, and unrelenting, yet within you a fortress is forming, composed not of walls or defenses, but of discipline, clarity, and unwavering attention. This is the essence of Stoic power, the persistent, patient, and deliberate shaping of the mind, the refusal to let it scatter, and the conscious choice to cultivate every moment into strength. Step by step, thought by thought, you begin to rise above impulse, above chaos, and above the trivialities that consume so many lives, discovering that true power resides not in circumstance, but in the quiet, steadfast mastery of your own mind. The mind is the crucible in which all strength is forged, and attention is the fire that determines the shape of what emerges. Marcus Aurelius often reflected that life's challenges are not burdens, but opportunities to test and refine the mind, and that only those who govern their thoughts with discipline can transform difficulty into power. When you consciously direct your focus, when you refuse to allow fleeting impulses or external distractions to scatter your energy, you begin to construct a kind of inner armor, quiet, unyielding, and patient. Epictetus taught that no circumstance can control you unless you surrender your mind to it, and every moment spent reclaiming your attention is an act of freedom, a reclaiming of authority over your own life. Seneca observed that countless hours are lost not to misfortune but to inattention, to the subtle surrender of awareness to trivialities and unimportant concerns. The act of focus, repeated again and again, begins to reverse this loss, gradually building resilience, clarity, and deliberate strength that others may not notice, yet which shapes every choice, every action, every response you make. As this practice deepens, you start to perceive the subtle but profound changes within yourself. Your emotions stabilize. The pull of external chaos no longer dictates your inner rhythm. Decisions that once felt overwhelming become clear, grounded in reflection rather than reaction. Your presence grows steady, deliberate, and commanding, not through force, but through the quiet authority of a mind that is disciplined and anchored. This is the nature of true power, not loud, not ostentatious, not dependent on circumstances, but cultivated through the patient, persistent, and deliberate mastery of your own attention. Every reclaimed thought, every moment spent focusing on what matters, compounds into a life lived with intention, a mind trained in clarity, and a character strengthened by the consistent choice to govern itself. Through this practice, you rise above distraction, above chaos, and above the trivial demands of life, discovering that real power is born quietly, within, as the unshakable result of deliberate, sustained focus. The mind is the crucible in which all strength is forged, and attention is the fire that determines the shape of what emerges. Marcus Aurelius often reflected that life's challenges are not burdens, but opportunities to test and refine the mind, and that only those who govern their thoughts with discipline can transform difficulty into power. When you consciously direct your focus, when you refuse to allow fleeting impulses or external distractions to scatter your energy, you begin to construct a kind of inner armor, quiet, unyielding, and patient. Epictetus taught that no circumstance can control you unless you surrender your mind to it, and every moment spent reclaiming your attention is an act of freedom. A reclaiming of authority over your own life. Seneca observed that countless hours are lost not to misfortune but to inattention, to the subtle surrender of awareness to trivialities and unimportant concerns. The act of focus, repeated again and again, begins to reverse this loss, gradually building resilience, clarity, and deliberate strength that others may not notice, yet which shapes every choice, every action, every response you make. As this practice deepens, you start to perceive the subtle but profound changes within yourself. Your emotions stabilize. The pull of external chaos no longer dictates your inner rhythm. Decisions that once felt overwhelming become clear, grounded in reflection rather than reaction. Your presence grows steady, deliberate, and commanding, not through force, but through the quiet authority of a mind that is disciplined and anchored. This is the nature of true power, not loud, not ostentatious, not dependent on circumstances, but cultivated through the patient, persistent, and deliberate mastery of your own attention. Every reclaimed thought, every moment spent focusing on what matters, compounds into a life lived with intention, a mind trained in clarity, and a character strengthened by the consistent choice to govern itself. Through this practice, you rise above distraction, above chaos, and above the trivial demands of life, discovering that real power is born quietly, within, as the unshakable result of deliberate, sustained focus. The true measure of strength is found not in the moments of comfort, nor in the fleeting surges of motivation, but in the relentless practice of returning your mind to focus when it strays. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the mind must remain disciplined, because it is the source of all freedom and all power. A scattered mind is a mind enslaved by circumstance, emotion, and distraction. When you deliberately anchor your attention, you begin to reclaim not just time but sovereignty over yourself. Epictetus taught that we suffer only when we allow events and distractions to command our inner state, and every moment spent regaining focus is an act of liberation, a silent but profound demonstration that your life is governed by intention rather than chaos. Seneca observed that most people drift through life unnoticed, their attention surrendered, their potential wasted, yet even a single moment of disciplined focus plants a seed that grows quietly, persistently, into lasting power. This practice is neither flashy nor immediate. It is subtle, gradual, and almost imperceptible in its effect at first. Yet over time, the repeated act of gathering your thoughts transforms the way you move through the world. Your reactions slow and become deliberate. Your decisions gain clarity and precision. Your presence begins to carry weight, not because of force, but because of the calm, unwavering authority of a mind trained to remain steady when all else is chaotic. The world may continue to demand, to distract, to overwhelm, but within, you build a fortress of attention, patience, and clarity. True power does not announce itself. It grows quietly, invisibly, and steadily until one day you realize that you have become unshakable, capable of enduring difficulty, resisting temptation, and acting with purpose, all because you chose, moment by moment, to govern your mind and refuse to surrender it to distraction. This is the essence of Stoic mastery, the cultivation of inner strength through deliberate, patient, and unwavering focus. There is a profound transformation that occurs when you begin to recognize that your attention is the most valuable resource you possess, more important than wealth, comfort, or recognition. Marcus Aurelius reflected repeatedly that the mind shapes the quality of life, and a mind left to wander becomes weak, restless, and vulnerable to every trivial disturbance. By forcing your focus, by refusing to scatter your thoughts, you reclaim control over yourself and over your life. Epictetus taught that the essence of freedom is internal, that no external circumstance has power over you unless you allow it, and that the first act of mastery is to govern your own attention. Each deliberate return to focus strengthens the mind, fortifies character, and builds resilience in a way that is quiet, patient, and unseen by the world, yet powerful beyond measure. Seneca observed that most people surrender their lives in small, unnoticed ways, giving attention to things that neither nourish nor endure. But when you choose to focus on what is meaningful, when you train yourself to bring your mind back again and again, a transformation begins. Thoughts gain clarity, emotions stabilize, decisions become deliberate rather than impulsive. Your presence becomes steady, calm, and commanding, not through force or demand, but through the quiet authority of a mind that cannot easily be swayed. Over time, the persistent practice of focus builds a strength that endures beyond circumstance, a power that is invisible yet undeniable. The world may continue to pull at you, to demand your attention, and to overwhelm with noise, yet within, a fortress forms, composed of disciplined thought, patient awareness, and unwavering presence. This is the Stoic path, the cultivation of inner power through deliberate focus, the patient shaping of the mind, and the realization that true mastery lies not in what happens outside you, but in the unshakable command you hold over yourself. The mind that learns to focus deliberately begins to experience the world differently. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that life's disturbances are not in the events themselves, but in the mind's reaction to them, and that the strength to endure and act wisely arises only when attention is anchored in purpose. When you force your thoughts to remain on what matters, you are not merely completing tasks or following routines, you are shaping the very essence of who you are, building patience, clarity, and an inner authority that cannot be shaken by circumstance. Epictetus taught that freedom is found in the governance of the mind, that nothing external can control you without your consent, and that every moment spent reclaiming attention is a step toward sovereignty over your own life. Each deliberate act of focus, repeated over time, compounds quietly, forming the framework of character, resilience, and calm power that will sustain you through every challenge. Seneca observed that most people drift through life unnoticed, giving their attention to distractions that drain them, consuming hours and energy without realizing the subtle theft of their own strength. By contrast, the act of focusing cultivates a profound inner life. Thoughts gain precision, emotions find stability, and decisions flow with deliberate intention rather than impulsive reaction. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a new strength emerges, quiet, patient, and enduring. It does not demand recognition, nor is it flashy. It is the unseen foundation of every action, the steady current beneath the surface that carries you forward when chaos surrounds you. The world may remain loud, chaotic, and relentless, yet within you a steadfast presence is forming. A mind trained to govern itself, a character tempered by patient discipline, and a life guided by purpose rather than distraction. This is the essence of Stoic power, the cultivation of unwavering attention, the mastery of the mind, and the recognition that true strength is built quietly, moment by moment, in the deliberate shaping of your own inner world. Real influence over your life is born the moment you take absolute responsibility for where your mind rests. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that a scattered mind is vulnerable to confusion, anxiety, and impulsive action, whereas a disciplined mind shapes life with purpose and clarity. When you force your attention to remain steady, you begin the subtle process of constructing a life that is not dictated by circumstances, other people, or fleeting desires, but by deliberate intention. Epictetus emphasized that no person or event can disturb you unless you grant it authority, and that sovereignty over your mind is the foundation of freedom. Each instant spent returning focus, guiding the mind back to what truly matters, is a silent act of reclamation, a reclaiming of power, patience, and clarity that compounds over time into resilience that others may never notice, but which defines your existence. Seneca wrote that most squander their energy in small, unnoticed ways, surrendering attention to trivialities and passing concerns, losing themselves without realizing the slow erosion of strength. Yet, as you cultivate focus, you begin to perceive life with sharper awareness. Decisions become deliberate, intentions clear, and reactions measured. The pull of external chaos diminishes because your inner state no longer bends to it. Quietly, consistently, a new presence emerges, not loud, not demanding, but steady, unwavering, and authoritative. Strength develops in the discipline of attention, patience, and repeated practice, forming a mind that cannot be easily moved, a character that cannot be easily shaken, and a life that moves in alignment with purpose. The world may remain turbulent, loud, and persistent, yet within, a fortress arises, invisible, silent, and unyielding, built not from circumstance, but from the patient, deliberate cultivation of focus and the conscious decision to govern every thought, moment by moment, until mastery over oneself becomes a lived reality. True resilience begins when you understand that the mind is the source of all power and attention is its instrument. Marcus Aurelius often reflected that the quality of life is determined not by external circumstances, but by the state of one's thoughts, and that a mind left unchecked becomes weak, restless, and vulnerable to every trivial influence. When you deliberately guide your focus, when you refuse to allow distractions to scatter your energy, you begin to reclaim the authority that life often demands you surrender. Epictetus taught that freedom is not found in comfort or circumstance, but in the ability to govern the mind. And each moment spent returning attention to what matters is an act of liberation, an assertion that your life will not be dictated by impulse, noise, or external pressure. Every repeated act of focus compounds quietly, building an inner strength that is subtle yet unshakable, patient yet relentless, invisible yet undeniably present in every decision, every reaction, every deliberate step you take. Seneca reminded us that countless lives are wasted not through tragedy but through distraction, the surrender of attention to fleeting pleasures, trivial concerns, and incessant noise. By choosing focus, you transform each moment into a deliberate act of cultivation. Thoughts sharpen, emotions stabilize, and choices gain clarity that previously seemed impossible. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, an enduring strength emerges, one that does not demand recognition or applause, but shapes your existence and influences everything you do. The world remains loud, unpredictable, and chaotic, yet inside you a fortress forms, quiet, patient, and firm, built not on circumstance, but on discipline, awareness, and the deliberate mastery of thought. This is the heart of Stoic power, the accumulation of countless small acts of attention, the patient training of the mind, and the unwavering commitment to shape yourself moment by moment until your inner strength becomes a foundation that no force outside can unsettle. At last, you begin to see the culmination of every deliberate moment, every act of attention, and every return of focus. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that life is not measured by how little it challenges you, but by how firmly you hold your mind steady amid difficulty. Epictetus taught that freedom comes not from changing the world, but from mastering your own thoughts, and Seneca showed that the smallest, most disciplined choices compound into a life of strength, clarity, and unshakable presence. The power you have been seeking externally was always within you. It simply required your attention, your patience, and your unwavering commitment to return to focus again and again. Now, as you sit with this truth, recognize that mastery is not an event, but a process, a lifelong cultivation of the mind, moment by moment. Every distraction resisted, every thought reclaimed, every deliberate choice you make builds a fortress of inner strength that cannot be shaken by circumstance or noise. You have become powerful not because life became easier, but because your mind grew disciplined, your character sharpened, and your presence solidified. This is the essence of Stoicism: quiet, patient, relentless, and transformative. If this message resonates with you, and you want to continue building the discipline and clarity that shapes an unshakable mind, comment below and subscribe to the Stoicism Notebook. Join a community of seekers, thinkers, and doers who are committed to mastering their own minds and living deliberately. Remember, every moment you choose focus is a step toward power, freedom, and purpose, and your journey has only just begun.